Today we are working on Module 4, Lesson 13. Our objective today was to multiply a unit fraction by another unit fraction. And now a unit fraction is any fraction with a numerator of 1. So a unit fraction can be any fraction with a numerator of 1, and that's all we were doing today. So examples would be 1/4 times 1/5, 1/2 times 1/3, and so on and so forth. Now we know when we're multiplying fractions that we're just multiplying numerator times numerator and denominator times denominator, so we can get 1/6. We can also represent this by showing 1 times 1 over 3 times 2, getting 1/6 as well. So only numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. All right, so let's look at number 1. Solve, draw a rectangular fraction model to show your thinking. The rectangular fraction models are similar to the rectangular fraction models we drew when we were trying to find a common denominator with addition and subtraction. So say we have this question right here that says half of one half cake equals blank amount of cakes. Well, let's go ahead and write our multiplication sentence. So half of 1/2. So half of 1/2 or 1/2 times 1/2. And what does that equal? Well, we know through multiplication of fractions that numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator, this will equal 1/4. But how can we show that with a rectangular fraction model? Well, like I told the students today, go ahead and draw a rectangle. We know that originally they probably started with a whole cake. Then they ate half the cake, so how much? They have 1/2 left. Well, then they ate another half of the cake. They ate half of the remaining cake. So then we're going to go ahead and half that. So if you notice, we started with a vertical cut and we shaded half. Now we're going to go to a horizontal cut. Now this is what was similar to when we did addition and subtraction with uncommon denominators. Now we're going to say we have half of that one as well. So we could shade. You can shade the whole thing, or you can stop just in this box. And now, where did the two overlap? Well, they overlap right here. So our new unit is 1. Again, we only have 1 circled. And what is our whole? It's 4. So 4 units equals our whole. So we get 1/4. So let's go ahead and write that over here. So we get 1/4 of a cake. And now this just repeats all the way down. So 1/3 of 1/2 cake. So 1/3 of 1/2. What does that equal? Well, we know through multiplication, and that of really just means to multiply. Of equals multiply. That this is going to end up being 1/6. Draw a rectangular fraction model in the same way. You can draw it as a square rectangle. So 1/3 of 1/2. So we're going to start with that half because we know we have a half. And then we're going to split it up into thirds, and then 1/3 of that 1/2. And that is 1 unit that we have out of 6. So 1/6. Oh, I'm at the top of the page again. 1/6. And we're just going to repeat that all the way through. I'm just going to give the answers for the final ones. I would like to see the rectangular fraction models for the rest. So we have 1/8, 1/10. 1/9, and 1/12. Now remember, in multiplication, the denominators do not have to be alike to multiply them. That's only in addition and subtraction. That's the only time you have to have common denominators. You can have unlike denominators with multiplication and division. So let's look at these word problems. Noah mows 1/2 of his property and leaves the rest wild. He decides to use 1/5 of the wild area for a vegetable garden. What fraction of the property is used for the garden? Draw a picture to support your answer. So I'm going to draw a tape diagram for this one. So let's see. He has a property, so one whole property. Half of the property is mowed. The other half is wild. Whoop, spelled that wrong. Wild. And then 1/5 of the wild, so this is 1/2, this is 1/2. 1/5 of the wild area is going to be used for vegetables. So what is 1/5 of the wild? So that is, what is 1/5 of 1/2? So we can, again, draw a rectangular fraction model. We already know half. And it's in fifths. And then where does it overlap? It overlaps right here. And that is 1/10. And we know 1 times 1 is 1, and 5 times 2 is 10. So 1/10 of the wild area is being used for a vegetable garden. So we could have also expanded with our tape diagram and gone, well, we know this is 1/2, right? So then what is 1/5 of that 1/2? Oh, I think I drew too many lines. Yep. 1, 2, 3. Yep. So it was 1/5 of 1/2. And so we would have ended up still multiplying. So there's 1, 2, 3 ways you could have done your work here. And of course, if you know how to multiply your fractions, or you're struggling with multiplying but you know how to do this, these two can easily be used to check your work on both parts of them. All right, number 3. Fawn plants 2/3 of the garden with vegetables. Her son plants the remainder of the garden. He decides to use 1/2 of his space to plant flowers, and in the rest he plants herbs. What fraction of the entire garden is planted in flowers? Draw a picture to support your work. All right, so we have to read this question again. We need to make sure that we are positive on what we are looking for. So 2/3 of the garden is vegetables, and that's planted by Fawn. Her son plants the remainder of the garden. He decides to use 1/2 of his space, so this is 1/3 because she has 2/3. So right here is 2/3. Trying not to go too much into the question, but they don't give me a lot of room to work. And we know 1/3 of the garden is the son's. So it's saying he decides to use half of the space to plant flowers, and the rest he plants herbs. What fraction of the entire garden is planted in flowers? So we need to look at the son's amount. So 1/2 of his space is to plant flowers. So 1/2 to plant flowers. And how much space does he have? He has 1/3. So 1/2 of his space, so 1/2 of 1/3, he plants herbs. What fraction of the entire garden is planted in flowers? So it's important that we're looking for flowers here and draw a picture. So we already have our picture. So 1/2 of 1/3 equals 1/6. So he uses 1/6 of his garden, of the garden to plant flowers. Now the last question, I'm going to have to erase a little bit of the bottom of this one. Diego eats 1/5 of a loaf of bread each day. On Tuesday, Diego eats 1/4 of the day's portion before lunch. What fraction of the whole loaf does Diego eat before lunch on Tuesday? Draw a rectangular fraction model to support your thinking. All right. So he eats 1/5 of a loaf of bread each day. Diego eats 1/4 of the day's portion before lunch. So what is 1/4 of the day's portion? Well, the portion is 1/5. So 1/4 of 1/5. So, but we need to draw a rectangular fraction model to support our thinking. So let's go over here. And he has 1/5. We know he has a portion of a fifth. And then he eats 1/4 of that fifth. So where does it overlap? It overlaps right there. So that is one portion of how many units total? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Out of 20. So 1/20th. We could have also done it with multiplication. 1/4 times 1/5 equals 1/20th. And easy peasy. This is a good beginner lesson for the next couple of lessons. So go ahead and do that homework. It's pretty simple. A couple of questions. I think it was like 9 altogether. 9 questions altogether. Not too hard. All the questions are pretty easy. Again, it's just unit fractions times unit fractions. So let's make sure we're working on that. Let's make sure we're working on that. We always know that your numerator is probably going to be 1 if we're doing unit fractions times unit fractions. All right. Well, I hope you have a great night. See you.